We're here today in a very interesting workshop that I'm hoping that you're going to get a lot out of. It's about career development. We all know that during the course of the pandemic, many people have really had a chance to reflect on their career path, their career decisions, and where they want to go next. We've held a couple of sessions throughout the winter and then into the spring about this very subject. And so Joe, who's an educator and director, Tourism HR Canada, has also been an instructor at some of Canada's leading culinary colleges, is here to instruct the workshop and talk to you about what are some of the ways that you can think about your career path in the field of hospitality. So Joe, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Amazing. Thanks, Arlene. Good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing? Doing all right? Yeah. Highly engaged Monday morning crowd, I can tell. So as Arlene said, we're going to spend a little bit of time going through and talking about career development. And, you know, when putting this workshop together, I was really thinking about it from two perspectives. First and foremost, this is a career development workshop that you can use to reflect on your own career. And that's really valuable and really important. But ultimately, it's also a career development workshop that should give you enough inspiration and enough access to resources that you can then turn around and use what you've learned here, either within your organization or potentially with people who you are mentoring. So as you're going through this workshop today, let's think about it from both of those perspectives. Yes, of course, this is about you because you are here to participate in this, but also what can be applied to the other people around you who you take responsibility for as it relates to developing their career. So that's going to be the focus today. When Arlene was asking me to design this workshop, it is a combination of a masterclass and a workshop. So my assumption going in is that you are all highly engaged learners, highly engaged professionals. So I've packed this full of all kinds of really high impact content. But what I've done is almost everything that we'll talk about during the next couple of hours leads to further resources should you decide that you find something that really resonates with you and you want to dig deeper into that, that will be there for you as well. So once the workshop is done, everybody will get a copy of this presentation. I know there's a couple of people already on the call who have to pop off early, so we'll get you back later. We're also recording the presentation, so hopefully we can give access to everybody that way. It's a combination of a masterclass and a workshop, which means I'm going to share as much as I possibly can with you, but there is also some interaction. It's not too heavy for Monday morning, but it does get you thinking and get you working, and then we'll get back to some content as well. So I am going to start sharing my screen here. I have my PowerPoint in front of me. Can I get an audible "I see it" from somebody?
I see it.
Awesome. Thank you. Perfect. All right.
I see it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Great to hear some voices. All right. Why am I stuck? All right. So career development. Think about the next couple of hours of as having somebody right here on your side as your career coach, as your career guide. I'm full of positive reinforcement, and this message may seem a little bit heavy on a Monday morning, but this is really meant to be an empowerment message. The reality of the situation is career development is mostly on you. There's nobody coming in to help you develop your career. Now, if you're working within an organization and you happen to have a boss, a mentor, somebody who's helping you along, that's really great. But I don't think that it's actually the default setting for most people. So career development is ultimately something that is mostly within your hands and mostly within your control. So just keep that in mind as we're going through today, that this is about you. This is about things that you can learn, things that you can do to really advance your career. So let's talk about what's going to happen over the next couple of hours. I've divided this masterclass into 3 components. We're going to talk a little bit about growth and change. We're going to do a reflection and visualization exercise, and then we're going to get practical. when you talk about career development, as much as I get to, which is great, love it, most people want to get right to the practical. And sometimes getting right to the practical, it's kind of like having a private jet that's fully fueled sitting on a runway, but you don't know where you're going or how you're going to get there. So that's what we're going to do at the top here. We're going to talk a little bit about growth, a little bit about change, take us through a reflection and visualization exercise so we know exactly where we want to go, we know exactly how we're going to get there, and then we can get practical. And again, keep in mind, this is a masterclass. So there will be a combination of philosophy, strategy, there will be some exercises, some brainstorming, some thoughts, and ultimately we're going to leave you at the end of this with lots of your own thinking, lots of your own work to do to take this career development in your own hands. So let's start out talking about growth and change. Why? Well, ultimately, career development is about creating change in your life, creating change in your career. And if you are going to create change intentionally, you might want to think about how change comes about. It's kind of a funny thing, especially over the last couple of years. We've all been thrown into this environment that's constantly filled with disruption, that's constantly filled with things that we weren't expecting. And ultimately, we're trying to navigate our way through it. And we're trying to foster personal and professional growth and change. But if you were actually critically reflecting and thinking about this, when was the last time you thought about how to create change? And is there some kind of best practice that you can follow in terms of how to create that change in your life? In this case, that change is career development. And yeah, there are some really great best practices that you can follow. But I think what's important also is to recognize that ultimately, when you are creating new growth within your career or helping those around you create new growth, you're ultimately reinventing yourself. And as mentioned, this is a masterclass. This is not just my ideas. This is all about resources that you can dig deeper into later on as you continue your career journey. So let's go to the experts. Joe Jackman, author of The Reinventionist Mindset, a very successful consultant who ultimately leads personal and professional reinvention and change and transformation for organizations. He's got a really great perspective on reinvention. And here we are in this era of disruption. Don't you ultimately want to thrive? So how do you thrive in an era of disruption? You reinvent. Change is everywhere and it's coming for us fast. Joe Jackman was a keynote speaker at one of the Restaurants Canada shows just before the pandemic, talking about reinvention and change. Kind of funny now when you reflect back on how significant that was. But there is a way, there is a method to reinventing yourself. And career development, in many cases, especially for those people who have been really affected by the changes in our industry over the last couple of years, career development becomes all about reinvention. And reinvention can sometimes get a bit of a bad rap. It's not really throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's ultimately reiterating your original idea, reiterating understanding why you were in the career that you were in to begin with, and ultimately what you want to do next and where you want to go. So there's an algorithm, and it's really impactful if you're reflecting on growth, both how to create growth within your personal life, within your professional life, but also how to identify growth in the spaces around you. Because what's unique here is we're talking about career development, but career development isn't ultimately all about you. It's also about the environment that you are now finding yourself in. The world that you are working in has changed. So how do you identify and how do you create growth, personal growth and professional growth? Well, there are three components of growth when all put together create change for you in your life, but also allow you to identify the growth and change that's happening around you. Let's get into that. Three pieces of the growth algorithm. The first, resiliency. We've heard a lot about resiliency over the last couple of years, probably as much as we've heard about pivoting. But do you really understand what resilience is? If we all drew up our definition of resilience right now, would it be the same? Let's see. And we'll go to the experts too to try to identify what resilience really means. Vulnerability. This is a really interesting one. Vulnerability is actually a component of growth and is a skill that you yourself can develop. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about vulnerability before all of this was happening. And then we found ourselves in a very vulnerable situation. Vulnerability is the second component of growth. And the third ultimately is adaptive capacity. And it is exactly what it sounds like. When these three elements are together, growth happens. And I'll give you some examples so we can dig deeper into this. So, as mentioned, what is resiliency? What is resilience? Let's go back to the experts. Adam Grant, author of Think Again, professor at Wharton University. He's an organizational psychologist. He is my current go-to guru as it relates to navigating through this world that we're all experiencing. Got a great podcast actually called Work Life. It's one of my favorites. So Adam Grant defines resilience as the strength and speed of our response to adversity. Reflect on that a little bit. Resilience is the strength and speed of our response to adversity. And resilience, interestingly enough, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, is a skill that you can develop. How do you develop resilience? Well, you overcome adversity. And sometimes you can sit there and think, well, how on earth have I ever been able to develop my resilience skill? Hard to imagine anybody on this call and anybody in their lives, regardless of the pandemic, haven't overcome adversity. So when you're trying to develop your resilience, or when you're trying to understand resilience, think back on the times in your life when you overcame adversity. What did you do? What was your mindset? What were your actions? Who were you talking to? Sometimes you go get over adversity and it works really well. Sometimes it doesn't. Reflect on the positive times. Resilience is the strength and speed of our response to adversity and a component of growth. Vulnerability. What is vulnerability? Once again, let's go to the experts. Brene Brown, author of Dare to Lead, among others, a really interesting speaker and author who somehow managed to combine the world of vulnerability and innovation, which is a really interesting concept. So Brene defines vulnerability as embracing uncertainty, risk, and exposure. Interesting. When was the last time you intentionally created a mindset to embrace uncertainty, risk, and exposure? And think about this as it relates to career development. Career development can often feel really scary, especially if, through no fault of your own, you find yourself in a situation where you need to work towards a new career because maybe something changed. Something changed within the organization you work for. Some condition changed in your life that forced you to adapt and find yourself looking at something that you weren't previously considering. Vulnerability ultimately is about embracing all of those pieces that are changing around you, embracing the uncertainty, embracing the risk, and embracing the exposure. And very much like resiliency, vulnerability is a skill that you can develop. And especially when we're helping young people develop, whether that's with their careers or whether that's within your own community, your friends, your family, this is what we ultimately put right before confidence. You want to develop confidence? Get out there, get yourself out there, expose yourself to new things. Don't worry, you're going to be fine. Get going. This is vulnerability, putting yourself in a situation that is uncomfortable. But ultimately, the more you expose yourself from a vulnerability perspective, the more you learn about yourself. And what we've found, especially over the last couple of years, is the more we share about what we are experiencing, the more people get to understand us. And I think it's a really courageous skill and a very important component of growth. And let's look at the last, adaptive capacity. Adaptive capacity is the ability of an individual or a group to realize change. And I'll tell you why this is significant. Many people will be hit with the overwhelming impact of a change in their life and a change in their career, and they won't be able to actually realize change themselves. And sometimes people characterize this group as when you find yourself in that victim state, when you were overwhelmed, when you were overcome with the circumstances of what's happening around your life. Adaptive capacity is the ability to realize that change. So if you want to create growth in your life, in your personal life, in your professional life, you need to focus on three components: resiliency, vulnerability, and adaptive capacity. And I use this image as a source for you to look back on later as you're reflecting on growth. Why? Because growth and the growth algorithm are present everywhere in the natural environment. Think about it for a second. Resiliency ultimately is everything that happens below the earth line. Look at this little plant. Resilience, our strength and speed of our response to adversity. That's our roots. That's what happens under the surface. Vulnerability, embracing uncertainty, risk, exposure. In what is uncertainty, risk, and exposure in the natural environment? Well, it's the elements, it's the wind, it's the rain, it's other plants, it's other animals. And when you embrace that vulnerability and you embrace that uncertainty, you have the ability to actualize growth, which is the adaptive capacity. And sometimes we reflect on growth and we think, you know, it's really hard. It's really hard to foster growth. It's really hard to create a change in my career. But you already know the answer to this question. Without growth, there's what? If this plant doesn't grow, if we don't grow and adapt and change in our lives, you're stuck, you're static. And career development is all about intentionally fostering growth and change. Let's go back to Joe Jackman here for a second, because I think this is really important for us to reflect on before we get into some more of the practical details. The surest way to stay true to who you are, company, brand, or even individual, is to reinvent so as to continually become the most powerful and relevant version of yourself. Creating change, fostering growth, working on your career is not about abandoning everything you know about you and going in a completely new direction. It's about staying true to who you are, but it's about becoming relevant. It's about becoming powerful. It's about focusing on creating change to be the best version of yourself. And I think that that's really, really critically important, because if you are focusing on career development for yourself and you're thinking about going in a completely different direction, sometimes you feel like you're losing a little bit of yourself because you've put so much of yourself into your career. But the point here is you don't have to lose yourself to make massive, significant change in your life. You can really focus on becoming the most powerful and relevant version of yourself as you lead that change. Reinventionist Mindset, a great book. Dare to Lead, a great book. Think Again, a great book. 3 resources. If any of this resonates with you, you can dive deeper into them. Okay, so we talked a little bit about a growth philosophy, the growth algorithm. We are ultimately, if we are developing our careers, we're trying to create change. Again, as mentioned at the top, that can be change for yourself, career development for you, or how you can apply this to the people around you who you are either trying to help or responsible for. So also wanted to make sure that I'm leaving you with resources that you can dig deeper into later on. So we talked a little bit about the philosophy of growth, the growth algorithm. Let's talk about a process that was developed. This one was developed by Multi-Health System. This is called the Change Navigator process. And it is researched from thousands and thousands of organizational leaders, how we create change. And this model is available everywhere. So you can do lots of searching and dig deeper into this later. But before we go through that process of change, let's talk about the emotions of change. Why? Because this is all about motivation. So sometimes there are emotions that lead us to resilience, and sometimes there are emotions that lead us to resistance. I'm sharing these with you as a self-check-in. If you are trying to create and foster change in your career, what are you experiencing right now from an emotional perspective? What are you feeling? Are you feeling a sense of purpose, enthusiasm, optimism, confidence? Or are you feeling a sense of anxiety, confusion, frustration, fatigue? Why does it matter? Because all that matters is that you know what you're feeling and you know where you're starting from as you're moving through your change journey, as you're trying to develop your career. Have you focused on feeling a sense of purpose? Have you focused on feeling enthusiastic? Have you intentionally decided to be optimistic and to foster your confidence? Or are you kind of defaulting into the other state, feeling a little anxious, feeling a little confused, feeling a little frustrated, feeling fatigued? It doesn't mean one set of emotions is good and one is bad, or one is okay and one is not okay. It's always okay to feel whatever you're feeling. But this is just about identifying where you are. Because if you're ultimately trying to really foster change within your career, aren't you better off to be in an emotional state that leads to resilience? So these are some emotions. This can be a sticky note that you put up on your wall. This can be a screenshot that you take, leave it in your email, leave it in your desktop. What am I feeling today? I'm trying to create massive, significant change in my life. What am I feeling? Great. Maybe I should try to focus on feeling these things instead of these things so that I can really move along in my change journey. And if you're helping others develop their careers, you can identify the same thing in them. How are you feeling? What are you feeling? What are you going through right now? Now you're in a state where you are creating resistance to your own change. You're the one that's trying to mastermind your own career development. You ought to be focusing on emotions that help you get there, not emotions that stumble you along the way. So emotions of change are really, really, really significant. And yes, this might feel a little bit different to kind of explore this. This is not necessarily practical or tactical, but change and career development are all about motivation. So you need to put yourself in the best possible emotional state to create what you would like to create. So I told you I was giving you a change model to follow. Let's go through those stages because this is a well-researched model of change, and it ultimately is the backbone to creating a career development plan. So the first stage of change, effective change process, is acknowledging. It begins with awareness. Emotions are apparent and patience is critical. Here we are sitting, reflecting on how you're going to navigate your career development journey. It's important to acknowledge, here we are. This could very well be the very first step in your change process. Being aware of what's happening, letting those emotions come to the surface, and being patient with yourself. Here's a tip, insider tip. You're building an acceptance and commitment to your own goals, to your own change experience. So spend a little bit of time focusing on that because it's worth not skipping over the early stages of change. Second, reacting. Begins with a change. Something's going to happen. You know it's going to happen. You're going to put together a resume. You're going to get an interview. You're going to talk to somebody about something. And then what? You have that reaction. Oftentimes people think reactions aren't a positive thing as it relates to change. Oh, this is really bad. Oh no, what's going to happen? I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I feel okay. That's all right. Reaction is normal because It's helping you move through the change process. Denial is common. And again, critically reflect on the times when you're navigating through that change. You're in a little bit of a state of denial early on. And that's why the antidote is information. Focus on where you're going. Focus on what you can do next. And again, as you're navigating through your own career development process, you are building an understanding of the need for and the scope of change. You are building within yourself an understanding of why you need to change and what that change is going to look like. These are pretty big things for you to wrestle with. So no wonder you're having a reaction. And most of the time, the reaction's happening inside you. Or if you have friends, family, colleagues who you're sharing this journey with, this is the time where you're saying, hey, this feels uncomfortable. This is just something's happening. I'm moving forward. I'm confused. Having reaction to change is very normal. And in fact, it's a sign that you're moving forward. And I think it's something that you should really take a moment to experience. Third stage of change, investigating. See, this is what happens on the other side of those feelings and emotions. After those feelings have been vetted, anticipation is common. Oh, interesting. Anticipation is kind of like excitement. Honesty is critical. Very important at every stage here that you are identifying exactly what's happening around you. That's why having career development friends, colleagues, mentors is really, really critically important. And again, a tip, you are building within yourself a commitment to a new reality. Think about how significant that is. You are creating a new reality within yourselves. For so many of us, our careers are such a significant part of our life. Now you're creating something completely new. You're investigating. You're dipping your toe into the water of change. What's this future going to look like? What are these things going to be? How is this going to actually manifest? How is it going to come to life? And finally, stage 4, implementing. And again, got to say, lots of people really love to rush to this, especially you reflect. This is a change process that's much bigger than career development. Think about how many people rush to implement a change. Personal life, professional life, within the organization you're working, outside, within our governments, within our world. Quick, here's an implementation. We don't know what's going on, where we're going. We're just going to jump right away to implementation. Implementation, effective implementation begins after direction is defined. And we are going to define your own direction in this workshop today. After direction is defined, learning is expected. Imagine that. You're finally at a stage where you're implementing the change in your career that you want to. Learning is expected. Of course it is. Think about what it's like when you actually end up with that new job, or you start that new business, or you've done something completely new in your life. That's where you're focusing on learning. You're focusing on learning because you're moving yourself forward. And buy-in is critical. And this is kind of an interesting thing. Sometimes when you're talking about change as it relates to a group of people that you're trying to work with, you understand the concept of buy-in. But when was the last time you reflected on what buy-in meant to you, yourself as an individual? Are you bought in to this new life that you're creating? Are you bought in to this new aspect of your career? That's a really interesting question. And a tip, insider tip, here we go. You're building new skills, new behaviors, and new norms. Quite frankly, implementation takes a lot of energy. And again, if you're reflecting critically on times in your life where you have realized change within your career, that first 6 months of that new job, that first 6 months of that new business you started, that's exhausting. Why? Because you're building new skills, you're building new behaviors and new norms. It's not just about what happens within your career, within your workplace. Your career and your work affect a huge chunk of your life. Yes, work-life balance, very critical. And of course, you should be taking care of yourself. But don't underestimate how much energy is required to put into the final stage of change, the final stage of achieving that career development goal. You landed a job, amazing. You started a new business, amazing. Why am I so tired? Because it's new, because you're developing, because you're building, because you're growing. So again, just before we move on, just wanted to touch base again here. This is a multi-health system change process. It's called Change Navigator. It's everywhere. And very much like when I was telling you about the emotions of change, the most impactful component of this change process to me is at any given time, reflect on where you are. Where are you within the process of change? Because you can move through this change process always linear. It's not about being at the beginning and navigating towards the end and everything's great. No, of course, it's not going to be like that. It's going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Find yourself on this graph. Find yourself on this visual. Where am I right now? Where am I as it relates to implementing this change? Oh, I'm really super far advanced. Oh, wait, I'm not. Acknowledging, reacting, investigating, implementing. 4 steps of a very well-researched change model. This can be a blueprint for you. This can help you navigate through the change that you're trying to create within your career. All right. So I just want to take 2 minutes before we move on to the reflection and visualization. Give everybody the opportunity to stretch, to grab a cup of water, do whatever you need to do. We're just going to take a very quick power break, 2 minutes. So we're going to do a little bit of reflection here, a little bit of visualization, start to get those creative juices flowing within yourself. So we talked about growth, we talked about change, we got a little bit of theory in our heads, got a little bit of philosophy in our heads. We know how we can create change within our lives and within our careers. Let's start setting a little bit of direction. So these are 3 very well-used questions that prompt you to reflect on and set the direction for career development. These are very significant questions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through these 3 questions. Then I'm going to ask you, as we are sitting here, everybody who's on this call, to start to craft some answers. And then we're going to do a little bit of a group sharing opportunity if you feel comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable, that's fine. You don't have to share, but I'm hoping some courageous souls out there will share. And I'll start sharing some of mine as well, so you can get a sense. These are 3 very well-researched questions that create incredibly positive direction for your career. Question number 1. What do you really want in your career, especially in the next phase of your career? I'm going to pose this because what's really important is sometimes we're focusing on career development because we're feeling stuck. But sometimes we're focusing on career development because forces around us have forced us to reflect on something new and to take a new direction. You ever want to stump somebody who's complaining that they're not living the life that they want to live? Ask them what they really want. So here's the first question in your career development journey. And I'm asking it directly to you. What do you really want? You don't have to answer yet, but you are going to have to answer in a minute. What do you really want? Second question. Why do you want it? Ooh, that's even more intense than the first question. Why do you want it? Why are we asking why? Another great author, Simon Sinek. Lots of people have got that. TED Talk, book, start with why. If you understand your why, you understand your motivation. Why do you want it? And the third question, this is the accountability question. This is the driver of change. What specific actions can you take to achieve your goals? Specific actions. These 3 questions are instrumental in identifying what you want, why you want it, and what you are going to do to achieve it. So I want to take you through a bit of an exercise. I want to give you the opportunity to take some time to reflect on these questions and to craft an answer. Now, if I was working on these with you within your organization or you as an individual, this is a really intense exercise. And this is something that would require at least a couple of hours of deep reflection and reiteration. We don't have that kind of time today. This is a masterclass though. And Arlene told me that people that are subscribing to this are really focused on their career. So this should come fairly easily to you. But what I want you to do is I want you to reflect on those questions. And I want you to start to craft some responses right here, right now. I'll give you a little bit of time to work on. Actually, I'll give you a good chunk of time to work on. We'll do about 5 minutes of question. We'll take about 15 minutes to reflect on those questions and to craft some answers and to do a little bit of sharing where you feel comfortable, especially here we are embracing vulnerability, right? Putting ourselves out there. But, you know, because this is just a masterclass and because this is just a workshop, what I also want to commit to you is if you'd like to share those with me later, I have contact information at the end of this presentation. If you want to share your question, the answers to your questions, I'd be happy to review them with you later on because these are intense questions. This is about you. This is about your career and the direction that you're heading in. So we're going to do a bit of an exercise right now, but just know in confidence, if you'd like to share with me later, I'd be happy to spend a little bit of time going with them with you because these are really, really important and really foundational to your career. And as I said, here we are, 2021. I'm talking about vulnerability. Well, I better lead by example, right? So what I did is I reflected, and I'll give you a little bit of context on my goals and the answers to my questions. So I spent 15 years working in the post-secondary sector as an educator. And I knew towards the end of my time in education that I wanted to create something new within my career. I wanted to foster change. I wanted to do different things. So I wrote these responses reflecting on that moment in time in my life when I was trying to create change. So forgive me, there's a lot of vulnerability here, a lot of openness, but I just wanted to give you an example of what I'm hoping you can create right now. So here we go. What do I really want? What do I really want? Me, in the next phase of my career, I want to do work that's rewarding, challenging, and impactful. I want to work somewhere between the tourism, hospitality, and education industries. I want to do work focused on learning and development. I want to do media work, including speaking, writing, and sharing people-centric stories of others' success. I want to be self-employed. I want to be working on many projects and with many people who inspire me. I want to earn $257,000 a year. I haven't achieved that goal yet for the record, but that's what I want. I will be highly selective of who I work with, and I will adhere to a strict no asshole policy within my career. That is what I really want. So as you're crafting this, the more you can describe what you want in vivid detail, using language that evokes emotion within yourself, the better. So I'm going to ask you to reflect on what you really want within your career. Let's talk about my why. Why do I want it? Listen, got to be honest. I recognize that my time on this earth is short. I want to find fulfillment in my work that adds values to the lives of others. And that's just me. That doesn't have to be you. You don't have to want those things. You can want something completely different. I want to inspire and I want to be inspired. I want to be original. I want to make my contribution to an industry that shaped my life and the life of my family for 3 generations. I want to prove to myself that all my aspirations can come true. I want to feel alive, and I know myself well enough to know that I am at my best when I'm leading, learning, creating, and lifting others. I want to find joy and humor in my work. And yes, guess what? I refuse to work with assholes. That's my why. That's why I want what I want. Hopefully you're seeing how this is unfolding here, and hopefully you're starting to think about yourself. My example, my answer to the last question. What specific actions can I take to achieve these goals? And even reflecting on when I was writing this is not even specific enough, but for the purpose of this exercise, we don't have a huge amount of time. So this is what I committed to do. I will work feverishly within my network to connect with others doing what I aspire to do. I will invest in my own professional development. I will take care of my physical and mental health. I will ask for what I want. I will believe in myself. I will outwork everyone on the planet to achieve my goals. And nope, I will not work with assholes. So there you are. Now it's your turn. You've seen mine. I want you to take some time to reflect on these questions. And this is really, really significant. This is a really significant component of this masterclass, but it's also a really significant component of your own career development journey. So I'm going to give you, it is 6:50 where I am. I'm in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm going to give you 15 minutes. And what I want you to do is on your own, in silence, I want you to mute your microphones. You can turn your cameras off if you like. You can stay on, your choice. I want you to reflect on these 3 questions, and I want you to start crafting, and I want you to start answering them, and I want you to think about how you're going to position these within your own reflective process of your own career. And then I hope that you'll share. And so I'll ask for some volunteers to share. And I know that some people will be willing to put themselves out there and some people won't, and that's absolutely fine. And like I said, what I'll do at the end of this presentation, you'll get all my contact information. I would be happy and honored to help you reflect on those and craft those post workshop as well. So here they are again. What do you really want? Why do you want it? What specific actions can you take to achieve your goals? I'm going to give you 15 minutes. I'm going to turn on a little bit of music. Let's see if that works, just to get everybody in a good space. Yeah, let's do this. Got some nice creative vibe flowing for you here. Is that working for everybody?
Thanks, Joe.
All right, let's get on mute. I want you to take 15 minutes.
It was definitely hard to kind of think about what I wanted.
Oh,
So it's definitely tricky, but good.
thank you, Samantha. It's hard to figure out what I really wanted.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty important statement, isn't it?
Actually, I think this is the hardest question, really, to answer yourself and figure it out what I really want. If I would know what I really want, then I will probably much easier answer the rest of the questions.
That's it. The rest of the masterclass is you saying that over and over again. Exactly. If you knew what you really wanted, the likelihood of being able to experience what you really wanted is much, much higher. Right?
Yeah.
So you all saw my my responses to those questions, and those were real. That's authentic. Anybody feeling like they would like to share, and I'm not going to do copy and pasting into the chat because I think that's a lot. Anybody want to just read sort of what they have in terms of what they really want in their career?
Okay, maybe I could start.
Thank you.
In the next phase in my career, I want to work between the tourism and hospitality industry, using my broad experience in project management. I want to work within the industry, which gives me more enjoyment than any other before. So far, that's what I say.
That is good. Thank you for sharing. Does that feel like it's starting to pull you in a bit of a direction?
Yeah, I think.
I mean, and again, this is a non-judgmental workshop. When was the last time you actually thought about what you really wanted in your career?
Actually, several months ago. Actually, no, maybe no. Maybe, to be honest, it's probably 3 years ago, like, and unfortunately it hit just before pandemic.
Sure, sure. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for courageously being the first to go. Anybody else? We're going to move our way through those questions, so there'll be lots of opportunities for everybody to share. Anybody else want to share what they really want? And maybe you're sharing because you came from a place where you uncovered something that you really want that you haven't necessarily thought about before.
I can share mine.
Thank you.
Definitely not as hard to follow up with that one, but basically what I said was I would like something fulfilling where I'm able to make an impact on someone's life. I want to help people find employment or find a job that they love. I want to help people overcome the challenges in their lives, and I would love to work within a community network.
That's lovely. How does that make you feel?
Kind of made me realize how much I want a job that would make an impact on someone's life. I want to help people with their barriers and overcome these barriers because I love the feeling that it gives me. So that kind of opened up my eyes because I didn't think that was important as it was.
Thank you for sharing. I can feel that. I can feel that emotion in there.
Oh, good.
Yeah, for sure. Because that's what's going to move you, right?
Yep,
That's
absolutely.
what's going to move you to action. It's not that you're just putting a bunch of words down on paper, that you're the what you really want is ultimately leading you to why you really want it. We'll come back to that in a second. But thank you for sharing, Samantha. One last person, please. Really hoping we can get somebody to share what they really want.
I can share.
Thank you.
So I want to continue working in the restaurant business. I want to like learn all the stations in a restaurant, like apps, entrees, salads. I want to learn everything. I want to be a head chef someday. Hopefully, have my own restaurant and have the skills to travel the world. And I realized after writing this that the main reason I want to do it is just to prove to myself that I can do it, and that I don't need to hold any I guess personal like regret. I was like, oh, I could have done it, but I want to say that I can do it because I did do it, and yeah.
Wow. Amazing. How does that make you feel?
It's very like eye-opening, because at the end of the day, it's up to me and not really anyone else.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a pretty important part of this. That's empowering, right? What you want, identifying what you want, why you want it, what you're going to do to get it, ultimately gives you the ability to navigate that course, to navigate to where you want to go, right? Thank you for sharing. I know this may seem a little bit painstaking, but it's a really important, critical, reflective process here. And the sharing really helps us work our way through. So anybody want to share their why? Preferably not the people who told us what they want to do. You don't have to tell us what, but tell us why you want what you want. Anybody feel like sharing? Yeah.
So I have been working in the tourism industry for 8 years. Prior to that, the not-for-profit industry. And this summer, I was let go from my role because apparently during a pandemic, no events are being held, and my role was coordinator, festivals, events, and special projects. So yeah, and it's funny, I fell into that role. I didn't actively seek that role. And upon losing that role, prior to that, I had never really missed an industry that I had worked in because I, bounced a few times, 90s full of contracts anyways. And I realized I want to stay in the industry. And that's my why for going forward and ensuring that I can do so. And because my role was very varied in what I did, I realized that I can branch off into different areas. So necessity forced upon me the decision to stay in this industry. That's my why.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. And I'm sorry that you experienced that. And it's too common these days, but how did searching for your why, how did that make you feel?
Oh, absolutely anxious, nervous.
That's okay.
At 50 years old and 52 years old in Northern Ontario, I am facing a nice big challenge, and I'm going to attack it with everything I can because I know I can do it. It's just,
Good for you.
it's terrifying, but exciting at the same time.
Well, like I said, I will share contact information at the end, and just know that you've got an ally in me. I'm happy to help through this process.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm going to ask somebody to share, because sometimes the accountability question, which ultimately brings all those aspirations right back down to reality. I want somebody to share the specific things they're going to do to achieve what they want to achieve because they understand their motivation. So what specific actions are you going to take to get what you want? Anybody feel like sharing?
I can share.
Thank you.
So my specific things are a change in my mindset, really. And for me, it's pushing myself to believe in myself and my capabilities. I won't let others decide my worth or my value. I will stay focused on my goals and recognize that not everyone has the same wants or needs, and I'll be confident in myself. And so for me, my specific goals are really adjusting my mindset before anything else.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. How challenging was it to arrive at a place where you had that much clarity?
It was challenging. It requires a lot of self-reflection, and not only on the jobs that I've had, but also on my mindset in all of my various roles.
Yeah. And good for you for taking that accountability, because that's a really big step and a really challenging one. Thank you. Anybody else? Last chance for anybody else to share something just to help them talk it out, get it through. Sonia?
Talking about specific actions,
Yeah.
I would say I will work with the people in this industry, try to build a wider network of professionals in the field. I believe in my competency and capabilities, and I'm positive that I could provide contribution to the business. Again, I have lots of transferable skills, which could be very useful in this process and in this field. However, there is always something that we can learn more. And personally, I am the believer in long life learning. So it's always adding something new and try to share that with others and fulfill my own wishes to do that.
Wonderful. Thank you. I can feel your optimism. Congratulations. That's great.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. We're going to wrap up that activity. But like I said, whether you would like to share them with me just to have a conversation and talk it out or not is completely up to you. But if there's any one takeaway from this presentation, and as you are thinking on your own career, ground yourself in those 3 questions. This is also a very iterative process. What you want, what you really want, why you really want it, what you're going to do about it, change over time. And it's okay to realize that you've arrived at a place that what you wanted 6 months ago is not what you want now. That's fine. Keep those up on that pin board. Keep those up on your computer. Ask yourself those questions. And again, as we mentioned at the beginning here, this is career development workshop that you can ultimately apply to the other people in your life. So if you are experiencing people who feel like they're stuck, or you are experiencing people who feel like they're having challenges within their career, or they're thinking about a change, put those 3 questions in front of them and help them through that process, because getting that clarity is really meaningful. And something very specific that I said is really, really powerful. When you are writing the answers to these questions for yourself and you're reflecting on the answers, vivid detail that evokes emotion inside you is critical. That doesn't have to be for you to share with anybody else. What is it that you really want? You should be able to write it. If you want to use a vision board, you want to take a photo of something, or you like, just dig into that. We spend so much time in our lives, especially in our careers, fulfilling things that our employers or our businesses demand of us. We just don't spend enough time on ourselves. So now you have 3 really, really powerful questions. There is no such thing as too much time spent on reflecting those things or reiterating them. So just make sure you hang on to those and come back to them a little bit later on. So I am going to jump back into sharing my screen as best as I possibly can. Let's see this. Everybody see that? Yes, somebody?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So we're at the last component of this masterclass. We are in the practical and tactical. Remember what I said at the beginning? Practical and tactical is where people really want to sink into. Yeah, how do I get to where I want to go? And now you understand why it's so critical to really reflect on growth, reflect on how to create change, and really create that visualization in terms of what you're actually looking for. So let's talk about some things that are a little bit more practical, grounded in your career development journey. So it's interesting. Here we are, 2 years, 18 months into this crazy pandemic world. If you knew me before the pandemic, you would know that I got to spend a lot of time working on skills. And it's actually interesting that the workforce development, ecosystem across this world, not just in this country, around the world, had shifted in terms of understanding skills and being able to speak to skills. And it was really starting to become a revolution in career planning, a revolution in economic development. Countries, and ours specifically, starting to identify what skills are required for the future of work so that we can lead to a very prosperous nation. This skills revolution was really had a head full of steam. Then we crashed into this pandemic. We're still living in this space. And I'll tell you why it really matters. It matters because if you are trying to architect your own career development, it's very beneficial for you to start to understand the skills that you have within you, the skills that you have mastered, and the skills that you may not have yet mastered that would benefit you later on. 2 reasons. Reason number 1, if you know what you're really great at and you know what you need to learn, then you can really create direction towards something that you're headed into. But the second one that's often underestimated because it's kind of behind the curtain. If your career development goals involve sitting in front of somebody else, from HR professional, president of a company, executive director, and talking about yourself, you need to evolve from talking about your experience to talking about your skills. Because the mask of experience, we are looking for somebody with 3 to 5 years experience. It's not the experience that we're actually looking for. It's the skills that we assume people have developed through that experience. And again, I promise this presentation is going to be full of resources. Let's get into some of those. Tourism HR Canada is a national nonprofit organization focused on creating workforce development tools, assets, programs, plans for Canada's broad tourism industry. Tourism is the big umbrella industry, and food service restaurants comprises about 50% of the people who work in the tourism industry. Tourism HR Canada has been spending a few years on something that they call their future skills framework. will be out for public use at some point soon. And the future skills framework essentially has mapped the skills and competencies required from frontline roles into senior executive roles. Why should that matter to you? Well, if you knew the skills that were required to achieve the goal that you wanted to achieve, and you understood your present state skills, you'd also have a roadmap to learning what you need to learn to achieve your career development goals. Conference Board of Canada, another very strong resource for research, is out there for you to access. Lots of reports on a regular basis. Conference Board of Canada is also engaging in a bunch of resources about skills development and future skills. Here it is. I mean, this is the theme, the future of work, the skills that are required. And Conference Board of Canada just actually released a report about the skills that are learned and gained through careers in the tourism and hospitality industry. So again, I'm telling you this because it's important for you to understand your present state skills. It's also important for you to understand the skills that may be required for the position or for the business that you're working towards, so that you can ultimately develop yourself and map yourself out. And the Future Skills Center. These are three huge national organizations. The Future Skills Center is funded by our federal government to do exactly what I'm talking about right now. Map the skills. What does Canada's workforce have already from a skill set perspective? And what do we need to have to be prosperous in the future, and closing the gap in terms of training and development opportunity? And this is a very, very recent report. You can find it. Go on the Future Skills Center. It's all there. Identifying and assessing social and emotional skills in the tourism and hospitality industry. And that's what I want to talk to you about at this stage of our workshop. So to the point that you've arrived in your career, there have been some technical skills that you have mastered, whether you're a chef, whether you're a leader of an organization, whether you're a manager. There are some technical skills that, especially as you're going into interview settings for jobs, that you automatically know you're going to be able to talk about. You're a chef looking for another job. The likelihood that the person on the other side of that table is going to say, tell me about managing food costs. Tell me about purchasing. Tell me about menu design. You have a certain understanding, and hopefully there's an understanding of those who are hiring you, that there are some essential technical skills. So I'm really not going to spend much time talking about that with you, because I think and I hope that you've spent lots of time reflecting on those skills. There is a whole other field that's starting to emerge. The field of social and emotional skills and the value and impact those have on our career are really, really profound. And what's unique about this is social and emotional skills are not new by any stretch, but the evidence and the research tied to the impact that social and emotional skills have on our careers is really, really starting to be a trailblazing piece of research. And why that specifically matters to you is the tourism and hospitality industry exposes the people who work in it to the development of the social and emotional skills. This is something you've already likely been exposed to, and there would be huge benefit for you to understand a little bit more about social and emotional skills, do a little more research, find out, do some assessment about your own social and emotional skills, which we'll talk about. I'll direct you to some resources, and understand, excuse me, that in many cases, the people who are sitting on the other side of the table, especially if they're in the HR world, they're trying to assess your social and emotional skills. It's kind of like a secret decoder ring here. So let's give you the language and the understanding and the knowledge of the social and emotional skills required for career success. So A, you can learn and reflect on yourself, and B, you can start to speak the language of skills as you're advancing your career. So social and emotional skills, when all wrapped together, create this thing called emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is your secret weapon for career development, mostly because it's going to help you understand yourself and where you want to work towards, but also because, especially when you're going into a formal organization, if you've decided within your career that what you want is a job or the next stage in your job, you can be assured that those HR professionals are walking around through the lens of emotional intelligence, evaluating candidates. And emotional intelligence in and of itself is just great for you and your life and your development. So if your next career path involves being self-employed, opening a business, developing and understanding your emotional intelligence is hugely beneficial too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through what understanding emotional intelligence. And again, this is a masterclass. I am going to try to give you a summary, an impactful, rich summary of emotional intelligence. The depth of research and resources out there that you can access to understand emotional intelligence are significant. So I'm going to try to do emotional intelligence justice in a short amount of time, but I would encourage you to dig deeper into understanding emotional intelligence. So let's do this. What is emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence, or EQ, which is the emotional quotient, or essentially a numerical value of your emotional intelligence, is ultimately a set of emotional and social skills that collectively establish how well we perceive and express ourselves, develop and maintain social relationships, and use emotional information in an effective and meaningful way. So emotional intelligence, though, is not cognitive intelligence. It's not IQ. Here's that data, research, science that backs up emotional intelligence. EQ is estimated to account for 27 to 45% of job success. This is a statistic that comes also from multi-health system, well-researched model, which I'll talk a little bit about. 25 to 45% of job success is ultimately about your emotional intelligence. How much time have you spent learning about emotional intelligence or developing your emotional intelligence? EQ and IQ are not highly correlated, which essentially means, excuse me, somebody with a high emotional intelligence doesn't necessarily have a high cognitive intelligence, and vice versa. IQ, though, is set and peaks around 17 years of age. EQ is not fixed and rises steadily with age. Emotional intelligence is actually something you can develop, whereas cognitive intelligence, none of us really get much smarter past the about 17 years of age. So also really impactful from a HR and development perspective, because we can all develop our emotional intelligence over time. And that means that there's impacts that we can have as we move through our career and as we move through our organizations. So like I said, my goal here is to expose you to a bunch of resources that if something resonates with you, you can dive deeper into this. So this is the EQI 2.0 model, developed by multi-health system and researched with thousands and thousands of people and organizational leaders. This is a lot. There's a lot of depth in here. So I'm just going to try to summarize this for you. Emotional intelligence impacts performance and emotional and social functioning. Emotional intelligence impacts success in coping with environmental demands, and emotional and social skills roll up into overall well-being. The center of emotional intelligence, a highly emotionally intelligent individual finds happiness. Wait a minute here. So there's science, there's research, there's a way for us to navigate towards well-being. Absolutely. Characterized by feelings of satisfaction, contentment, and the ability to enjoy the many aspects of one's life. I know that that might seem a bit out there, but emotionally intelligent people tend to have a higher level of well-being and experience happiness. How amazing, as if we didn't need any more motivation to learn about our own emotional intelligence, develop our emotional intelligence. This is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So let's keep focusing on that. So what I want to do is I want to take you through the 5 skill sets of emotional intelligence, the social and emotional skills that Future Skills Center, Tourism HR Canada, Conference Board of Canada, many other researchers are identifying that are present in careers in hospitality and tourism. And as we go through this, you'll start to understand, but that are also essential for a prosperous future. This is what they are. We used to talk about these as soft skills. Soft skills is a word that doesn't really make a lot of sense because they're really important pivotal skills, and calling them soft kind of changes your mindset a little bit. So these are social and emotional skills. There are 5 skill sets within the EQI 2.0 model that all roll together determine one's emotional intelligence. Skill set number 1, decision-making. Number 2, stress management. Yes, that's a skill. Number 3, self-perception. Number 4, self-expression. And number 5, interpersonal. Let's dig deep into those. Now, again, I'm giving you an overview of something that is extremely nuanced and rich. Hopefully, if something rings true for you here, you can find your way to learning a little bit more about emotional intelligence, understanding your own development potential and how that impacts your career development. So decision-making. Decision-making, the skill of decision-making is ultimately how well one understands the impact emotions have on decisions, including the ability to resist or to delay impulses and remain objective so as to avoid rash behaviors and ineffective problem solving. You can see why this is an essential skill, and you can also hopefully understand how careers in the tourism and hospitality industry develop our decision-making skill set, because we are constantly put in environments where we have to make decisions. Now, sometimes we develop our decision-making skills by making bad decisions, but as long as we're reflecting on those decisions and moving ourselves forward, then we're able to really strengthen that skill set. Stress management. You want to feel stressed? That little Jenga bar there make you stressed out? Makes me stressed out. Stress management is ultimately how well one can cope with the emotions associated with change and unfamiliar, unpredictable circumstances while remaining hopeful about the future and resilient in the face of setbacks and obstacles. Stress management has been one of the most essential skills for people to navigate the last couple of years. And we've seen it manifest in training such as de-escalation, right? How all of a sudden in a service environment, do you de-escalate a situation when your guests, your clients, your customers come in so heated? Or when you're de-escalating situations with fellow colleagues who come to the workplace and their lives are really challenging. There's a lot on us as tourism and hospitality professionals, which actually presents a unique opportunity for you to develop your stress management skills. Third, self-perception. Yeah, this is a skill set, really interesting. Self-perception is one's feelings of inner strength and confidence, persistence in the pursuit of personally relevant and meaningful goals, while understanding what, when, why, and how different emotions impact thoughts and actions. That's why those 3 questions that we spent so much time on are so important, because they trigger the self-perception inside of you. And it makes you get a little bit of distance from what you're feeling and from what you're experiencing, and helps you start to articulate exactly what it is that you want. Self-perception is a skill. It's a skill set that can be developed. Self-expression, very closely aligned with self-perception. But self-expression is one's propensity to remain self-directed, and openly expressive of thoughts and feelings while communicating these feelings in a constructive and socially acceptable way. You know, we talk a lot about this through the lens of psychological safety. And especially if you're in a position right now where you are running an organization or you're running a department, you're running a team, creating psychologically safe environments is really for this driving purpose, to give people the ability to be openly expressive of what they're thinking, what they're feeling. And yes, there's an onus on us to communicate in a constructive and socially acceptable way. Self-expression doesn't mean that at any given moment you are allowed to say and feel exactly what you want and direct it towards somebody else so that it's hurtful. That's not what self-expression is all about. But the opposite of self-expression, or people who have low self-expression in their emotional intelligence, is I just stay quiet. I think lots of things, I feel lots of things, but in the workplace, I don't say anything. I'm just under the radar. I'm worried that I'm going to get my head chopped off. That's ultimately, in many cases, a result of conditioning, unfortunately, whether in our personal lives or in our professional lives, where we were influenced to keep ourselves quiet because of the potential impact of what could happen around us in the workplace if we said something. And you think about community activism, you think about environmental activism, it's often not popular to take a contrarian perspective. But if you can express yourself clearly and you can express yourselves in a constructive and socially acceptable way, then you can be really, really persuasive when achieving your goals. And finally, the interpersonal. Developing and maintaining relationships based on trust and compassion, acting responsibly while showing concern for others, articulating an understanding of another's perspective, also known as empathy. Empathy is the cornerstone of emotional intelligence, recognizing, understanding, and appreciating how other people feel. Why is this so important? It's so important because the hospitality and tourism environment generally causes us to get into a business where we know that we are at our best when we are meeting and achieving other people's expectations. When we can put ourselves in the shoes of others, we are activating empathy within ourselves. Empathy is the cornerstone of emotional intelligence. Hugely beneficial to have high empathy when you're, I don't know, maybe sitting in a boardroom, going for a job interview. Not only are you responding and answering to questions that have been thrown at you, but you're perceiving others, what's happening around you. And I'm not talking about people pleasing. I'm not talking about changing who you are to satisfy the people who are on the other side of that table. Not at all. I'm talking about that ability to understand what is happening within them and for you to moderate whatever you are saying so that they can understand the perspective that you are trying to communicate. Empathy is huge in navigating your career goals, because whether you are trying to be self-employed or whether you're trying to advance your career within an organization, it's essential that you understand what's happening with the people around you. That's what empathy is and why it's so essential in the world of emotional intelligence. There it is for you again, the EQI 2.0 model. So we went through those 5 skill sets. There's a lot of depth here. You want to learn more about emotional intelligence. Very, very fortunately, there's lots of really positive and accessible resources out there right now that you can access. We're going to do a very quick exercise. This is a quickie. This is not a long, in-depth exercise like before. So emotional intelligence gives us the ability to navigate very complex situations, such as a job interview, such as career development goals, or going to a bank and trying to get a loan to start that business that you wanted to start, or convincing somebody to invest in your idea or your business. So let's put ourselves in the lens of a hiring manager. Let's say we've done critical reflection. We know exactly what we want. And what we are looking for ultimately is a role, a position within an organization that's fulfilling and rewarding and meets all of our needs and really resonates with us. That's what we've decided. And so now we find ourselves in an interview setting, but we are going to activate our empathy, and we're going to take the role of the hiring manager, the hiring person. And I'm going to give you two candidates who are going to walk through the door. Now, the interesting thing about these two candidates is their resumes read very similar. In fact, they both had the same job. One had the job for a shorter amount of time than the other, but they both had the same job. So from an experience perspective, they're relatively a similar experience because they had the same job, a very high level leadership role. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to evaluate their emotional intelligence. It doesn't mean that we're psychologists. It doesn't mean we need to get deep into their psyche. We're just trying to get a cursory understanding of their emotional intelligence. So I'm going to present these two candidates to you. And I'm going to ask you, tell me what behaviors you would expect these candidates to exhibit in an interview setting, and by extension, the behaviors that you would expect to see in the workplace. All right, ready? I'm going to present our first candidate. This is not a political conversation at all. We do not want to engage in a political conversation. This is just a very well articulated archetype. What behavior would you expect this candidate to exhibit in a boardroom, in an interview setting? Anybody?
Definitely confidence.
Confidence. Okay. What else?
This person has, I would say, some kind of anger management problem.
Oh, yeah, right. Exactly. You're seeing that. And how does that manifest in the workplace?
Totally opposite of something which I'm expecting.
All right. Okay. One more. Somebody else. What behaviors would you expect this person to exhibit in an interview setting that would eventually show up in the workplace? Come on, somebody.
I would expect him not to get what the purpose of the meeting was, and that there would be a lot of follow-up later with his team to ensure that the goals were met.
Right. Okay, this is great. Are you starting to see how emotional intelligence manifests in these interview settings? Let's look at that other candidate. Remember, I told you there are two candidates who had the same job. So from an experience perspective, they're relatively experienced. What about this candidate? In an interview setting, what behaviors would you expect to see from this candidate?
He is approachable.
Oh, okay. What
And
else?
he is willing to, I would say, to break a hard, tense atmosphere. But
Right. A little lighthearted.
yeah.
What else? Anybody else? What would you expect this? How would you expect this candidate to interview? Well or not well?
Really well.
Really well. Likely, probably able to read the room really well, right? Calm, cool, collected. But both of these candidates had the same job. So if we were looking at this from a purely experienced perspective, two candidates could come in with the same experience. But emotional intelligence manifests itself in an interview setting, and it also manifests itself in a career setting. And that's what I want you to think about. I want you to apply emotional intelligence to your own life, to your own career, and especially in the component of your career development where you're trying to navigate through a new opportunity. That's what's really, really critically important. So that's the end of the emotional intelligence component. There is a lot there. I would highly recommend you spend some time learning about emotional intelligence. I'll share some resources so that you can understand how to access some emotional intelligence tools. It's really, really important. And think about the social and emotional skills that are required for you to realize, we're going back to adaptive capacity, your ability to realize the change that you want to create in your life comes largely from your emotional intelligence, not about your experience. It's about the skills that you have within you and the ones that you can develop that help you realize your goals. So let's talk about succession planning for a second. Why is this so important? Well, if you're within an organization right now that you want to move up in, or you're in an organization and you want to move on, how important is succession planning? How important is it for you to have people around you who can step into the roles that you currently have so you can move on? It's hugely important, especially if you think about the legacy that you want to leave when you leave an organization. Ideally, you don't want the whole thing to fall apart. You want it to be a reflection of who you are. Succession planning is building that bench strength within the organization you're working with so you can go on to achieve the things that you want. Succession planning is hugely important for career development and often underestimated. Ask these guys how important succession is. Or maybe a more realistic example, these. Succession planning allows people to advance their own careers. I wanted to share a resource with you. We are not going to spend time in this workshop talking about the challenges of the labor market that people are experiencing right now. But we as an industry collectively need to do much more succession planning so that we can go on and advance and develop our own careers. And a big part of that is continuing to attract people into our field. I just wanted to share this resource from Tourism HR Canada. Propel is a program that's funded by the federal government that provides employers a wage subsidy of up to $7,500 to pay post-secondary students for work integrated learning experiences on the job. So if right now you are in an organization and you are trying to advance, think about developing the people around you so you have the capacity to move on with your career goals. Or think about the people that you need to bring around you so that you can advance your self-employment career goals. Career development has a huge correlation with succession planning. The people around us who are there and able to learn and grow and develop while we move our careers forward. If we aren't building more capacity within organizations, then it makes it harder and harder for us to move on. Why? Because you end up doing double duty when you don't have the right people in your organization. You lose that discretionary time and energy that you can spend on your own career when you're constantly chasing other people's job duties because there aren't enough people in the market. So one resource really worth checking out is propelcareers.ca. And let's talk about the table stakes. The table stakes to me are the tried, tested, and true things that regardless of how well you understand your career goals and how well you've developed your emotional intelligence and how well you've aligned yourself, there are three really, really instrumental pieces of career development that are essential, especially if you're trying to advance within an organization or move yourself to a different organization. Number one, yeah, it's still a resume. It's kind of a funny thing and all the digital technology and everything that's around. Your resume still speaks so much about you. Take your time, do some research, find best practices in resume creation. It's still a really, really essential element of career development. And it's kind of a funny thing. This last probably year and a half of my career, most of what I've been doing is self-employment, but I still have a very active resume. I still often have to send it to people when I'm moving in, potentially pursuing contracts or pursuing other partnership collaboration. Your resume is still ultimately a reflection of your career, but there are some new things after our experience together that you can add in here. Those new things include those skills, perhaps an opportunity, instead of creating a resume that aligns all of the experience that you have, that articulates the skills that you have mastered throughout your career. Interviewing, excuse me, interviewing is still table stakes as it relates to advancing your career. And the only way to get better at interviewing is practicing. And interviewing is such an important component of that first impression that you're going to make. It's kind of unfortunate because it's really subjective in many cases, but the only way to prepare for an interview and the only way to get better and better at interviewing is by doing more of it. So if you are thinking about a career change, if you are thinking about working within a new organization, I would encourage you to apply to more jobs than you think you are going to get. Because that experience in an interview, especially if you go into an interview and you don't end up getting the job, just think about that interview as the experience to prepare you for the next one. It's really a very awkward experience. It's a very awkward process to go through. But think about everything that you've learned today that you can apply to your interview. Think about emotional intelligence. Think about empathy. Thinking about developing that confidence and really understanding what you want, why you want it, and what you're doing to achieve your goals. That's going to come through in your interview. But regardless of the complexity of the job market right now, an interview is still a really, really important component of your career development. And once again, whether you're pursuing career development within an organization or you're trying to create your own business, your own career path, ultimately, you're still going to find yourself in an interviewing situation. And so being compelling and being clear and being confident still play very heavily into your career development goals. And, your digital footprint. It's kind of an interesting world we live in and probably isn't a surprise to anybody on this call, but everything that is accessible publicly online about you is really there for employers to look at. Now, should they? Technically, I don't believe they should, but do they? Yeah, they do. So do other people who you are approaching if you're trying to start a business. So think seriously about your digital footprint and ask yourself if your digital footprint is aligned with your career goals. Is it aligned with what you're trying to achieve? Or is it maybe time for a bit of a refresher? And there are lots of resources out there in terms of updating your social media profiles and making sure as much control as you have of what's online about you, make sure that, it passes that kind of Toronto Star front cover perspective. If what was on your social media account got into the hands of the Toronto Star, would it make news, or would people just kind of think, oh, that's just the comings and goings of a busy professional? It's an interesting world that we live in, and it's certainly challenging, but I would critically reflect on your digital footprint as it relates to your career goals. We're drawing to the end here. Promised tools and resources. We will get this slide deck out to you. These are a handful of resources that I think are really, really helpful and really impactful. Tourism HR Canada is full of resources, not 9 to 5, really great resources for mental health, well-being, critically important, both in your career development goals, but also in your personal and professional life. The Tourism and Hospitality Emergency Recovery is a tool set that was put together specifically for people in our industry coping with career change at the present moment. So there's lots there. The Institute for Health and Human Potential, there's actually a really interesting emotional intelligence quiz there just to get you started on that journey as well. And the Propel Student Work Placement Program link is there for you too, as you're working on succession planning when considering advancing within your career. So we are pretty darn well close to time from my perspective. We do have time for a few questions. And then I just want to share one more parting thing with you. Anybody have questions? Anything you want to talk about? Feeling like you've got lots. Hopefully you got access to a lot of new insights and certainly connected with resources so that you can dig deeper into your own professional development.
Actually, sorry, when you were talking about some of those questions, intelligent, emotional intelligence, etc. I had some interviews where I actually noticed that even interviewers are not well prepared, and they don't have that background. For example, figuring out about person or a candidate who would fit properly into the organization. Of course, human resources professionals, they have that background, and that's your usually initial contact with them. So that goes well. And then you get into discussion and interview with a hiring manager. And sometimes I was really surprised knowing that they actually don't know. Some of them even told me, actually, I don't know what to ask you. So it's really unbelievable, but that happened too. So
yeah, then, and you know what an amazing opportunity for you to activate your emotional intelligence and remain calm in that situation and still find a way to navigate through. It is an imperfect system, to be sure. Interviewing, job hunting, how we pick people with unconscious bias and all of the other things that influence our selection process. It is really a complicated and nuanced process. But stick with it and keep focusing on your own personal development. Just wanted to leave you with this. We started at the beginning with a tough love quote, "No one's coming to save you." Listen, either you will make your life work or your life will not work. The onus here is on you. And this is not about being discouraging at all. This is about being encouraging. You have the capacity within yourself to realize the goals that you want within your career. Everything that is in front of you gives you the ability to develop and move towards where you want to go. You have to take this journey in your own hands. You have the ability and the capacity to shape your goals and to achieve your goals. You can do it. You know you can. You already have to this point. And whatever you're experiencing, wherever you are, you're just in a moment in time, and wherever you want to go, it's laid out there right in front of you. And hopefully today's workshop, today's masterclass has given you some inspiration, some motivation, and all kinds of things to think about and navigate later on. I do want to leave you here with my contact information. That's my email address. That's my personal website. Also lots of stuff happening there. Social media handles as well. I want to thank you for your time, committing 2 hours on a Monday morning and being open and vulnerable and learning is really, really impactful and really meaningful. And I highly value that you have given me the opportunity to share a little bit with you. Please do reach out. I'm happy to speak with you. Hopefully there will be a time where we get to meet again face-to-face, but until then, I wish you well and thank you very much.